Charlie says that he hadn't seen a template for it elsewhere. So this is, I don't know that we're the first, but it's basically created by us. It's not modeled on some other district as far as I know. I mean, the only other, it wasn't an objection, but it was just a question I had last time. And maybe it's answered by the text of this. Is that the vast majority of this policy seems to apply to the superintendent making the decision to implement a mitigation strategy. But there is a little bit of a lack of language about ending or changing mitigation strategies. That seems like a very kind of minor semantic point, except that the last time the superintendent made decisions about the mask mandate, he made two decisions, if I remember correctly, within the 72-hour period. One was to impose it, and the other was to lift it. And there was a lack of communication, and at least from the outside, it appeared, therefore, a rationale for either decision. So, that's my only hesitation about this, is that I think it should probably include some sort of language about how the decision is made and communicated.
Yeah, and I think Zach had the same concern or thought in line with exactly what you said. Like, we don't want to be implementing a strategy and then cases change and then 2 days later we're taking it away. So I can certainly have Charlie add language about if we're implementing a strategy, what the bare minimum time frame that it would be enacted for.
Okay, I mean, it seems like that has to be determined by, what should drive all of this, which is the health and well-being of the kids and the employees of the district. Which is fine. It's just, I think it's really important for communication to be as open and clear as possible, both going into mitigation strategies and coming out, especially because somehow we now live in a world in which these decisions are politicized, even though they should not be. And we saw for hours on end the display of that at our own school board meetings.
Yep.
And so that's why I think rightfully Travis suggested we need to, this needs to come before the school board at some point. And so Charlie's written that in there.
There's a section on the second page, next to the last paragraph, further into the extent practicable, staff should document violations of this policy by students' age, race, and gender, and evaluate this information on a regular basis for bias and performance disparities. What does that mean?
That I'm not sure, and I will check with Charlie.
I think I know what that's referring to, but just to try and make sure that those who are being disciplined for violation of policy are not, that students of color are not being singled out disproportionately. But I don't.
That's how I took it in terms of reading it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, but it's not very explicit. Like I'm like, why would you do that? Like to what end? For bias enforcement disparities. So are we doing that across the board?
That would be my thought. Yes.
Like not just, violations of masks, but like across the board. Like, are we keeping a record or some sort of, like, I don't know, attendance policy? Are we all keeping that information?
I mean, we do certainly in terms of discipline infractions, right? I mean, this is a lot of the student groups have come to us over the years with evidence using our own data, showing racial disparities and suspensions.
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever we have something like attendance or discipline, when that data is analyzed, it would be in that same fashion of including the demographic information.
Is staff too vague? Like who, if this policy, because that's what it says, it's just staff. Right?
Staff should document.
And I know this is a first run through, but it's always a good idea to have some entity or person or office that's sort of charged with the task.
And usually our policies have like vocabulary,
Yeah, definitely.
you know, like just saying,
Jargons and
what do you mean by,
stuff. Yeah,
you know, it's a lot, you know, it's implied, but for someone who's reading it for the first time from the outside looking in, like just adding some vocabulary in here.
So it seems like we have two things. One, getting out of a potential, policy that could be created, and the second one is more clarity on enforcement when it comes to students.
yeah, because I would think with this as written, just saying staff, no one will be charged with that, so it won't happen. I mean, no one will be tasked with that, charged is wrong. Tasked with that, and therefore it won't happen.
I mean, was anything happening in terms of students? I didn't hear much about if a student decided not to wear their mask.
I didn't either. I'm sure maybe that's something we should look into, but
I can speak to that, having been at Central High School this year, and it really wasn't a major issue. Probably 95% of the kids were compliant, and they understood, and there wasn't really a lot. Just occasionally there'd be a pull up the mask on, but they usually do it. And that's just from what I saw, like it was a pretty compliant policy. There wasn't a lot of issues.
yeah, we've actually heard more about teachers and staff not complying.
Yeah,
than we
I
have.
was just gonna say,
It's
my
found its way to
experience
us.
in schools is the same. You see a kid without a mask, and they're like, oh, I'm actually like going to the nurse's office to get one, or do you know where I can find one? And it's not a discipline issue in any way.
So we're just going to continue the policy?
What is your sense of the urgency of this?
I think the hope is that because we continued it last time, if we continued it again, then we wouldn't be able to implement the policy prior to the start of the school year. So if there was a way to vote on it contingent on Charlie making these changes for the next policy committee in August to then bring to school board.
I mean,
Are these two issues like major for us to?
well, the one request is really just to put this in our policy template, which includes a definition section. So, which arguably, I mean, this one is, the title line is more close to our policy template, but really that one should be in the template, in our regular template as well. But this one definitely is not. So that's not much of a change. It's literally just a formatting change, right? Pretty much. It just needs to include definitions of some terms. And I think it'll be as obvious to Charlie as it is to us what terms those are with staff. Perhaps being one that requires the most clarification. And then the other point about, where I thought last time when we talked about this, I actually gave Charlie some potential language about the changing or ending a mitigation policy, but I don't know if you jotted it down or not. My eyes are tired from looking at the screen all day, so give me a second.
So in order for this to go into effect by the start of the next school year, the full board would have to vote on it by, when are you talking about? The end of July or the end of August?
End of August.
So we have one more policy meeting before that.
So if we continued it now, then in August, it would just be the first approval.
It would be the first read.
I do want to say we are. I mean, I don't have any issues like approving it for that, but it seems there's been a consistent thing of running against timelines of policies, or especially a lot of stuff like financial contracts. Because then we get a sense where it's like, oh, this is not like where we want it to approve, but then, hey, we need it for the start of the school year.
I mean, I think that because we do two reads at the board level, if all we want changed in the text of this is definition of terms with some clarity of what staff means, like connected to the org chart, so we know who's responsible for what's being mentioned there, and then Like we could add in under purpose, I think it's the second line. It, meaning the school board, will impose, instead of impose and implement mitigation strategies, could be impose, implement, change, and lift mitigation strategies aligned or left, whatever. But if we include change and lift in there, we're committing the district to making all of those decisions in a way that's aligned to what the CDC and RIDO say. Right now, all it's really saying is the decision to implement.
I would say on the implementation potentially out. I mean, the sentence after the list of mitigation strategies, it says may impose reasonable timeframes for transitioning to or from. But the question would be, what's reasonable? Right?
Yeah.
Like reasonable is very else.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't, when you put in a mitigation strategy, you can't say we're only doing this for 60 days. You have to say we're doing it until the conditions change that require us to lift it. You don't know what that's going to be. So that's why I'm just trying to make sure that that language is in there. Maybe it's implied, in the end. But
So when you all met last month and went over this, how different is this from the last time?
it's really only got the one sentence within 30 days of the implementation of a mitigation strategy under district procedures, second to last paragraph. I think that's the only addition that's been made. These other, actually, the definitions thing we didn't talk about, but this other part we did talk about, which was some language in there about.
And was the writer of the policy here?
Yeah, that was
that
Charlie, and he may have just forgotten that we talked about that. I mean, I feel like if I had 10 minutes and a laptop and silence, I could rewrite it and include
Well,
it. So
We got this how? Did we get it as a Word doc or a PDF over email?
He sent it to, when he sent the most recent version, it's a Word document.
Is it? Okay.
So previously, what may be helpful, especially when people are not here, is to send this to us as a Word doc or a Google doc that we can add a comment to.
Yeah.
And that way it's in the body of the documents and people remember to put or not put things in it. Because it still feels, like it feels, we're leaving a lot of things open to interpretation. And I understand that they need a policy. They've been talking about this since like June. I would feel comfortable putting it in for first read in July, but then in July, making sure that those changes are there for us to be able to approve.
Well, I think we
Well,
We're
the
talking about school
July-
board meeting.
The next school board meeting, because
Got
we have to, the full board has to get it twice.
Got it, yeah.
So when we see it July 27th, just be like, are the things we talked about in there? And if they're not, then we move it to second read for August. And if it's not, then we gotta revisit it.
Yeah, full agreement to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I can suggest if we have the Word version or Google Doc version, I can add a sentence or two that speaks to what we're doing. Definitions I'm less comfortable doing. That feels like a lawyerly task to me. But
And this should just follow the same template that we've been using. I mean, are we gonna,
yeah, so we can, I think, move to approve it and send it to the board. So first read, subject to those changes being made and sent to, be sent to this committee prior to being posted for the board meetings. Is that possible? So the board meeting is the 27th, so it has to be posted by the Friday prior. Is that right?
48 hours prior, yeah.
The Monday
But I
before.
mean, based on these changes, I feel hopeful Charlie can.
I mean, so the chair, like, that agenda that gets posted Monday should be approved by the chair the Friday.
Yeah.
Or as soon as possible before that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So,
And I think
Yeah.
what I might do is add maybe change, but probably add a little bit of language in here to reflect what I think we're talking about here. Maybe I can share it with the two of you and Charlie to make sure I'm not doing anything illegal or something. But then Charlie would have to do the definitions.
Yep.
Portion of it, I think. I'm not sure I would feel comfortable doing it, other than flagging, it's got to be more precise than staff on the second page if we're really serious about keeping track of that data. Then some entity has to be tasked with that.
So motion to approve.
Yeah, subject to the changes we've discussed. So you move.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
What is tomorrow? Tomorrow's Thursday. I can probably add some possible language to this and send it to you guys tomorrow. So that we can get this done before the end of the week. So the second one here is the Title IX policy. Charlie told me this morning he didn't make any substantive changes to this. He presented it at some length last time we saw him. I think at that point I was the only member of the committee who had seen it, so we kicked it to this meeting to give everybody the chance to look at it. I think Charlie said that he based it very much on template from, no, I don't remember. It might have been Boston. I don't remember. But he didn't change it much.
This is the first time we have this policy introduced.
It's just stunning to me, but yes, yeah. Title IX is, 50 years old, so it's a little.
We have a Title IX officer? Or didn't we? We should. We're supposed to, I think.
Yeah, we do have someone tasked with it. There's a Title IX coordinator, an individual employed by the school district. That's actually the only wording change Charlie said he made, and this was because it was on the second page under roles. It was mistyped or miswritten under Title IX coordinator, an individual employed by the school. He said he changed it to employed by the school district. Is that accurate? That's what he told me this morning, but I see it still written the same way in the text I'm looking at.
Oh, it says, page 7, Title IX coordinator, an individual employed by PPC.
By PPSD, okay.
Designed and authorized to coordinate the recipient's compliance efforts.
Where do you see that? On page 2?
Page 2 under roles.
Okay, all right, so it's been changed. All right, excellent. Yeah, so does anybody have any, not that anyone here necessarily can answer any of the questions, but hopefully we can ask them anyway. I mean, it seems pretty clear and straightforward to me, certainly necessary and long overdue.
Who is our Title IX coordinator?
I believe, I'm not positive who it is now. They previously were in the SAO office, but I'm not sure the current. I can find out.
Just curious.
So we usually, when something like this, especially, I mean, this is the policy, but the implementation is just as critically important. So it would be nice to be able to include that information when we give it to the board. Even if it, I mean, it doesn't have to live in this document, but just for like context and stuff.
Yeah, and if the identity of the person holding that, who's the Title IX coordinator, that would be useful to tell the board that, and therefore the public that at the meeting when we present it. That can be done in a number of ways. If you just, when I report on the policy during the meeting, I can provide that information if I have it. So we can just do it that way. If the Title IX coordinator wanted to come and present this, they could do that too, I suppose. And then the only other question I had about it last time was just, was this consistent with the collective bargaining agreement? And Charlie said he had checked that. So, and then it was.
mean, it looks pretty standard, but
Yeah, and there was some urgency to this because I think there is even some sort of a case or grievance pending now, so it's useful to have the policy.
so what was happening before? Were there just no complaints?
So is this, was this supposed to be, is this for the adults in the school community or everyone?
Everyone.
So shouldn't, I feel like this would live in the staff handbook
Yeah.
and the student code of conduct. Like, wouldn't this language be in either of those things?
I'm not certain. I think it certainly should be.
It has to be. I would, if it does, double check if it does,
Pretty
and then
sure.
double check that whatever is here is aligned with whatever's over there.
I will
Okay.
share that with Charlie.
Yeah, it's been a while since I looked at the handbook, but I'm pretty sure there's language in there.
It has to be.
Yeah, there has to be. And as recipients of federal funds, you have to have
There-
some sort of
there's a-
timeline procedure.
In the handbooks that I've seen at different schools and district-wide, there has been, I haven't looked recently, but there's also training and teacher orientation that reflects that at every school in the district, the India.
Yeah, I think maybe the need for this policy was just to clarify the process at the district-wide level.
And another thing that usually is in our policies is that if this same language lives elsewhere, right? Like you would be able, somewhere in here, probably at the end, it would say, see whatever law or see whatever other policy in the code number.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons
Like a
why the
reference.
template we've created is really helpful because it cross-references both other policies and state and federal law, relevant state and federal laws as well. So, I mean, I know we're in this sort of liminal period without a policy person at the moment, but we don't want to write too many new policies without putting them in the template. It's easy enough to go back and put them in the template, of course, but it does avoid duplication, but also conflicts between previous policies. So, I mean, that is I don't know whether Lindsay, what Mary asked is something you would do or something Charlie would do or both of you would do, but just to make sure, this aligns with employee handbook.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly talk to Charlie. He knows those in and outs
Yeah, and you may
much
have
better
checked
than
it out.
I do, so
You
he may have
done it
already
Yeah.
done that, but I'll certainly follow up with him and let you all know.
I mean, we could pass it assuming, I'm not sure that we should, because if it turns out there are conflicts or things that need to be reworded, I don't think we should.
Is this another one with a time sensitivity?
I think based on Charlie's, you spoke to him today, Mark, so I don't know if you have a better sense.
We didn't talk about the urgency question, but he brought it up when he first brought this to us at the last meeting. My sense was that it was something that was best passed soon because there may be some things percolating already that are related to I mean, I wish we had asked Charlie that precise question last time. I just asked him about the CBA and then whether it was consistent with that. If it's consistent with the CBA, it stands to reason it's consistent with the employee handbook, because the employee handbook is consistent with the CBA.
Well, do we have a copy of the employee handbook somewhere? I'm pretty sure that we signed. If we wanted to,
Probably online.
Yeah,
Should be.
yeah,
I mean, it was a draft that was sent to us way back when before they issued them. They're probably rewriting it as we speak.
got it in a file cabinet somewhere in this building. Imagine.
I know under Jennifer Leffery, it was online. Because I remember we worked on it and she's very proud of it.
But
Yeah.
in terms of passing this specific policy, even if it's not, I mean, if what I'm trying to say is like, what's the harm of passing this?
But I think this would trump both of those other documents.
That's what I
Sorry
was
to
gonna
use
say. I
that
think
verb,
we
but
would,
I think it Yeah.
We would adjust these based on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. And certainly the code of conduct, which we want to kind of revisit anyway.
So is this one at the same stage as the pandemic mitigation? We're trying to recommend this for first read.
You all approved it for second read. This is the second read of Title IX.
Oh, I didn't go to the last meeting.
Well, no, I mean, technically we continue to, policy committee doesn't have to do 2 reads of anything unless we choose to do so. We continued both of these from the last meeting. When we vote to approve them, we just did that with the pandemic one. It goes to the board for a first read, and then at the next board meeting, assuming objects, it comes up for a second read. So
So the board hasn't gotten either of these, only
No.
policy.
that's correct.
So July 27th would be the first read, August, whenever, would be the second read. So I guess we could do the same thing, all these notes back to Charlie, fix it. So, us review ahead of time, and if it's aligned and everything else, we include it in the agenda for July 27th.
I
First
think because they always redo the employee handbook, I think, every year, and it's usually right around now when they're doing it. I'm not sure who the they is at this point, but it's usually being redone now. So if when we pass this, the employee handbook has to reflect it and refer to it. I'm sure Charlie knows that, but we just want to make sure so we're not giving contradictory messages to our employees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Starting in late August. And I think it matters less whether this is consistent with or inclusive of the code of conduct policy, because it seems like this would trump that, but also that we're going to be looking at the code of conduct policy in this committee. So this year, at least I hope so. So if Charlie can just answer that question for us, preferably within the next week. We can always pull it from the agenda if it turns out we're not satisfied.
Mhm.
I assume that's the case. So.
Yeah.
So given that, do we want to pose a motion to pass it subject to Charlie answering our questions about the compatibility of this with the employee handbook?
It's a long motion pass.
Second.
Let's do the
Yeah.
code of conduct. All right, everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes. Yeah, I'm not sure how closely we're adhering to Robert's Rules of Order with this sort of
I
thing,
think
but
Travis is the
I
expert.
think we're good. Yeah.
okay,
All right. We're all committee members.
I'm cool. Doing it out under the bright sunlight and the light of day.
I always look at Travis to see if he goes like, she's doing it wrong.
Charlie's got some homework.
What was it? What was it? It'd be like no discussion or something like that. Or there was one thing that kept messing you up when doing. I think.
One thing that really messed me up was when someone changed the consent agenda
Yeah.
situation, because I had it I thought I had it down, and then the whole consent agenda thing, I was like, what?
Yeah, Rachel changed the way
What?
we did
What's
that.
that?
We were all so used to one way of doing it, which may or may not have been the better way of doing it.
We're
Motion to
online.
adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
Adjourn. All in favor of
All in
adjourn.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
So
The
close
meeting
off
is
the
adjourned.
YouTube.
Lindsay, do you want me to reach out to Charlie, or do you reach out to Charlie, or how does that work?
I'm happy to.